Welcome back. In the next video, we're going to start talking about something called lifecycle methods and APIs. Now, in order to prepare for that lesson, I want to go over something that we already saw. That is this component. Class app extends component. Now, what does that really mean? Component, if we look here, is part of the React library. And we're using destructuring here. But if I didn't include it like this, I could still use it using the React.component. Because component, well, is a property on React that we can use. And when we do something like class app extends React component, what we're doing is saying, hey, I want whatever functionality that this React component that was already built into the library by somebody, I want that functionality, and I'm going to add on to it. So for example, this render method comes built in with React component. And this React component gives us some batteries included options to use in our component so that we don't have to constantly repeat ourselves. We use something that React says, hey, this is a component, and we just tack on some specific functionality to it. As you'll see, we'll learn about lifecycle methods and how these components have some important methods already on them, such as if I type in COM here, you'll see that I have some methods that comes from the React.component lifecycle. But we'll get to that shortly. Another thing I want to talk about is this idea of an API. Remember how we talked about the birth of the single page application? How initially all we had to do with a normal web page was we visited a link and we got the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS file. When we clicked on another link, we went to a different page, so we got a whole new HTML, JavaScript, and CSS file. However, with single page applications, we now have this idea of communicating with the backend initially, where we get a tiny HTML page. Remember with our just ID of root, where we fill in our React component? And then we have this massive JavaScript file, or at least bigger than it usually was, with our React library, with our components, with any of our logic. So now, instead of having to communicate back and forth with the server, if I click on something and let's say visit a different part of the page, I don't have to go back. I can just have JavaScript or React say, hey, just re-render the DOM with something else. So now, with a single page application, instead of requesting a page, it's turned more into requesting for data. And this is when we have the ability to, let's say, communicate with outside servers, maybe servers that we don't control. For example, in our big project, we're going to talk to the Google Firebase database. We might talk to some different API endpoints so that now we can communicate with different APIs back and forth, and using JavaScript, just receive the data. For example, we saw that this JSON placeholder website, by entering into this website, all I get is, well, not an HTML page, right? All I get is this data that is formatted in what we call JSON. So this JSON data can be converted into, let's say, a JavaScript object that we can use. But all this does is provide us an API, a way for us to access information from, well, this server. So that now single page applications, instead of just rendering HTML, can use this data to perhaps display different monsters, different user information. And as we'll see, it will allow us to do interesting things like sign in, sign out, add items to the shopping cart. And we'll explore that idea throughout the course. And by the way, there's a way for you to actually check this. If we open up our developer tools and we go to network, and I refresh the page here, you'll see that I have this users document. If I click on it, and if I go to response, we see that this is the response that we get. So as you start to build larger and larger applications, what you'll find is that you'll start talking to APIs and trying to get different data for your application. And these endpoints or servers that we speak to can be third-party servers like Google servers, or they can be your own server where you perhaps have your own database. Now, that's something that we'll explore a little bit more later on. But the key thing is that the way we build applications now is very dynamic. Most of the time, we don't hard code all the information into these files. Instead, when a user opens something, we are always communicating with outside servers. So we're going to start structuring our app this way. Let's keep going.